Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Here in the New York area, it is Saturday. Wherever you are in the world, we welcome you to the second day of The Real Truth About Health in this year 2018. So today we're going to talk about a subject that I've just spent the last couple of years working on, and that's poultry. This is part of the legacy of turning stones that I've actually done over the last several decades. I started many years ago with the clothing industry to show you that clothing can drape you in disease-causing fabric that's made out of oil and deadly chemicals. We went down to the supplement industry and exposed that over 90% of supplements on the market globally today are in fact highly dangerous to take and may promote and create disease and further your disease. We're advocates of healthy, whole food-based supplementation. We went to the fish industry and the fish oil industry and showed you this is one of the biggest frauds precipitated in the history of man on supplements, which are actually crazy, but fish is even crazier. Fish oil, actually, we know for positive, promotes cardiovascular arrest, heart attacks, and stroke. We know that it creates cancer. We went down to the dairy industry and we showed you that dairy is the #1 cause of cancer and in fact creates coronary arrest, diabetes, and as a young person, if you drink it, your likelihood of contracting many forms of cancer as you get older go up 2 to 4 times. Isn't that interesting? And today we're going to speak about poultry. Now, when I was a little boy growing up here in the United States, everyone's aspiration was to have enough money to eat steak. So when a family could have steak on the table, Dad felt he had done his job, and Mom was happy because she was just in there frying that steak up, and little boys and girls were happy, smiling at the table. And somewhere around the 1970s, a handful of renegades started to question that paradigm. They started to say, wait a minute, how come Uncle Joe died and Dad died and Mary across the street died? And nobody was really willing to look at the truth, but they knew that something was wrong. As Shakespeare would have said, something was stinky in this process. So it almost organically, governed by the poultry industry, morphed into eat poultry because it's not steak. And so the mindset globally has become that poultry is a much better choice than red meat. And the fact is that poultry has more animal saturated fat than does red meat. And that's only the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. And at one point, people would have been embarrassed if they ate a chicken because that meant they didn't have any money. Isn't that interesting? Now, most of you know how successful fast food industries have been globally. And we here in the United States export a lot of things, but probably the most notorious thing that we've exported is the fast food industry. When I lived in Europe a long time ago, I really didn't find that there. Now, everywhere I go, there's an American fast food company smack in the middle of renowned historic sites all over the world. And I didn't know that the industry had become so absolutely influential that the chicken selling part of the fast food industry is actually far more economically successful than is McDonald's. Isn't that interesting? Did you know that? I was really surprised when I started a couple of years ago looking at this. So as big a name as McDonald's is, there's many, many chicken-pushing fast food people that are actually more successful than that. So this has been an incredibly successful ploy by the poultry industry that has actually captured the imagination of the mindset of humanity worldwide so that you justify eating these poor little birds because they happen not to be steak. Now, what's really interesting I think part of this has to do with size. And when you are an animal food consumer, in a way you're a bully. Isn't it true? And bullies don't like to pick on big guys like steers. You ever go out and fight a steer? How many of you, if you had to go and fight a steer for your meal, how many of you would do it? Probably nobody here. Because I'm going to tell you, steers are pretty tough. But if you're a bully consuming the flesh of another creature, chickens are easy to beat up. Turkeys are easy to beat up. Ducks are easy to beat up. And so in a way, they're little, so they're not really meat. And I think that there's a mindset that goes on like that. And you have all of this folklore that goes on around things like chicken soup. Chicken soup is penicillin. What kind of crazy stuff is that? Like, who wants to take penicillin to begin with? Although penicillin was a great finding, I'll tell you, mold on a bread. So let's explore this a little bit deeper now. It's really, really, really weird when you start to think about how we come to these conclusions. Is poultry a food? And this is what it actually looks like. What you're seeing is a conveyor belt when little chicklets are born. And this brings back a whole lot of emotions to me, because when I was a little guy right here in the New York City area, every Easter, we would get one of these chicklings. How many of you are old enough to remember that? And we didn't think anything of it. It was like a toy for us. So every family I knew would go out and get these little chicklings and play with them until they died, just like the turtle or just like the fish. And nobody thought much of it. It was just sort of a playmate that you had temporarily. And when Easter was over, you were disenchanted. You were waiting until another holiday came up and something else happened. Well, the most notorious part of this is domesticated fowl collectively, especially those valued for their meat and eggs as chickens, turkeys, ducks, geese, and guinea fowl, is the description of what poultry is. So look at this. Immediately when you look up what the name poultry means, it's a product. These are products. They have no concept that these are little creatures that have mothers, that have fathers, that have a pecking order. Matter of fact, where do you think the word pecking order came from? So humans use that all the time. Why? Because there is an innate intelligence within poultry that we completely disregard. Because if we start to think that these little creatures love and they feel, they have empathy, they have compassion, they have intelligence, they actually have a hierarchical society, they actually work together, then it would be a little bit harder for you as a bully to wring their neck. And that's exactly what happens with little boy chicklings. Because it's almost always better to be a boy in this male-dominated society. How many of you women would agree with that? Raise your hand. This is the one place you don't want to be a boy. Because if you're a little boy chicklet, they kill you. So they actually take them and they kill them, they throw them in a big bin, and they grind that up, and they use it for feed to feed other animals. And that's what happens to little boy chickens. How many of you knew that until I just told that to you? So at least 2 of you, 3 of you in this room. And you're supposed to be the enlightened worldwide. If you didn't know that, shame on you. Because you could tell your family, by the way, you're wringing the neck of little chicklings. So it's really, really weird. This is what it looks like, because when you disarm the entire process by thinking that these are products, it's much easier to wring the necks and pull all the feathers out. And how they do that, by the way, you think nobody sits there and picks it like you see in the old movies. They put it in a big barrel of acid. And that's on that conveyor belt what they're doing. So going down the row, they dip it in acid, and all the poor little feathers fall off. And sometimes, by the way, they're moving at that point. You may have seen the pictures where when they chop a chicken's head off, it still runs around a little bit. Well, that's exactly what's happening on the conveyor belt. We are lured into believing fowl is not meat, but healthy food. This is healthy food. You'd have to be out of your mind to think this is food to begin with. And healthy food, you're really out of your mind. That's the point you need to be walked into the insane asylum at that point. But it seems like the mass population of the world think this is healthy food. Recently, Chick-fil-A, one of the most successful fast food restaurants, more profitable, listen to this, more profitable than McDonald's, and they are closed 1 day a week. McDonald's is open 7 days a week. They're open 6 days a week. They have more stores in this country and now spreading around the world than does McDonald's, and they make more money than McDonald's. Why? Because there's this healthy food. And they know that, and they know the mindset of the public, and they know what you feel, and they know what your sentiment is, because you really don't want to change. And it's little, and you're a bully, and you'll kill the thing. So here's what they proposed. This restaurant promoted chicken as a health food and encouraged consumers to eat pounds every day. I will repeat what I said. Pounds for the people listening around the world is, for instance, at least a half a kilo to a kilo. So a half a kilo to a kilo of chicken a day, because it's going to make you stronger, healthier, and you live longer. Now, completely the opposite of the facts, completely the opposite of the truth, but when you're busy and you're working hard and you're stressed, you want to believe nonsense, because everyone else believes nonsense, and it's uncomfortable not to go along with the nonsense. Really uncomfortable. I don't eat red meat, so this is what I hear people say. Often when I'm lecturing, I say, you should be a plant-based eater, and they raise their hand. Oh, I eat fish. How many of you know that fish is not a plant? I eat chicken. It's not a plant. Maybe, I know that our educational system here, and certainly probably in many places in the globe, is not good, but I didn't know it was that bad. I mean, you really had to miss the entire first, second, and third year of biology to think a chicken's a plant. Somehow, other forms of animal fare slipped under the radar in the public consciousness. So we just completely think it's perfectly fine. So words association. Listen to this one. Now this really reveals the truth. So over in Norway, where seemingly, you know, they have a little compassion. They give the Nobel Prize, as my wife's country is Sweden does. They honor people for dignified things and moving humanity forward. Here we honor people in the United States for money. The guy with the most money, he's the toughest, the biggest, the smartest, and always the most corrupt. But we honor that. We honor that. So over the university there, they experimented to judge how terminology describing meat would affect people's choices. When the word beef and pork were placed on the menu with cow and pig, both empathy and disgust were heightened. So how about if you went to your local fine food restaurant all over the world where you live, and by the way, when you were about ready there with all of your family and friends to look at the menu, it said, by the way, you're going to eat a cow. What part of the cow? Do you want the real buttocks of the cow? Then you have to pay more money. Or do you want the less expensive one around the anal opening of the cow? Or if you happen to be in the low-income, high-end restaurant, maybe you want the leg of the cow. But they'll give you a cow any way you want. And all at once, people got disgusted. The same people that walked in, parked their Mercedes, sipped their fine organic wine, and they basically said, oh, I'm eating a cow? I never knew that. I'm 68 years old, and I've never known I eat cow. How about if you said, you're eating a pig? That's even worse. Well, when I was young, that was called pork loin. I never knew what a pork loin was. I knew I loved the taste of it because it was pure fat. That's all I knew. I used to chew it. Chew it. I think my jaws became bigger because of chewing pork loin. And can you imagine what that is? If you happen to be Jewish or Christian, they've actually told you in the Bible not to eat that stuff. That was 2,000 years ago. Get a look. But somehow you forgot that because you don't eat pigs and you don't eat cows. You eat steak and you eat pork loin. The world is really weird, isn't it? Meat your meat. Look at that cute little meat. We are taught that these highly social, intelligent creatures have no feelings or thoughts. How come I was so close as a little boy before I was completely corrupted, loving the little chicklet that I was given every Easter, that I fell in love with? But somehow when he died and I cried, and my mother and father said, oh, that's okay, we'll get you another chicklet. So slowly but surely, the scars of callousness went over my heart, and I no longer perceive this as a little living creature, as I would a brother or a sister. I perceived it as something that I played with and something that I consumed. But in our house, we didn't consume a lot of it, because when I was young, middle-class people actually had enough money to eat the meat they wanted to eat, which was called red meat. Do you follow? We didn't have to eat that low-income stuff called chicken. Now it's completely flipped. Completely flipped. On the contrary, they are sensitive to touch. These are facts. These are not opinions. I never give any opinions. I give facts that I can back up with my opinion, which is always stronger than the fact. Possess imagination. These are tests that have been conducted globally on this. Have shown numerical abilities. Probably they're better than most of you on counting. Think of that. They have perception, time perception. So they actually know what time of the day it is most often. You and I have to carry a watch. They probably get it instinctually. We've lost that instinct, obviously. They have memory, practice self-control, reasoning, and logic. They use 24 distinct vocalizations. So now we know they have a language. They communicate with one another. Not maybe, not possibly. This isn't Brian's opinion. This is something we know for sure. So we have scientists that literally have enough wisdom to say, let's really look at the social order and the communication between these creatures. They have unique personalities. How many of you ever around animals? How many of you recognize that they have unique personalities? Now, this is one of the scariest things that I found out. As an example, today's average turkey's weight, 29 pounds, is 121% more than it was less than a century ago. So, when my granddad, or as a matter of fact, that was the year my dad was born. My granddad gave birth to my father in 1929. Well, it was my grandmother that did that, by the way. We don't have one of those families. That's what a turkey looked like. And it was, a fairly healthy little creature. And we didn't eat much turkey. Here in the United States, back in those days, the only time that people ate turkey was Thanksgiving and possibly during the holidays, during Christmas, but very seldom during the holidays. It's pretty much exclusive to the Holocaust, called the Turkey Holocaust, that we have in November in this country. Canada shares that holiday with us. The rest of you don't know what we're talking about. That's when we give thanks to slaughtering the Native Americans in this country and possessing their country here, called the United States. By 1967, when I was having a lot of fun, had long hair, and was running around, it was the time of Aquarius. Ah! That's the size of turkeys. But here are the babies today. Look at the size of that turkey today. Isn't that amazing? And that is really on scale what it looks like. Now, the thing that you don't know about it is that turkeys can no longer make love naturally. Turkeys are incapable and have been incapable for a long, long time to make love naturally. So all the turkeys that you eat and have eaten in your life pretty much have been artificially inseminated, because their bodies are so contorted, so out of shape, that they can't mount one another. So besides not having the pleasure of a long and healthy life in nature, they don't have the pleasure of procreation. Because we choose to make them such a big product now, so we can make more money if we're turkey growers, I guess, that literally they can't make love anymore. Now, how many of you knew that in this room? How many of you knew that? One person. So we're doing better now. We're going down in numbers here. And you didn't know it. This is really weird to me. And how do they get the turkey to that size? Anyone know? They feed them ground up chiclets. They inject hormones into their body, because these ranchers and farmers that grow these poor creatures for product and profit literally make more for the pound, not what's in the turkey. Matter of fact, they probably inject water into them until they take them to market sometimes. I don't know that to be a fact, but I wouldn't doubt it. They do all of the rest of the stuff. This is an organic poultry farm. That's what you call your free range. That's actually a photograph of a free range factory farm. Look free range to you? You have this romantic idea that they're on the hills of southern France or, in Vermont or out in California, here they are walking around, kissing each other, chicken by chicken. And this is a free range farm. Free range fraud is rampant. Rampant. But you yuppies aren't going to like what I say now. You better shut down your cameras and computers, because you yuppies are going to say, this guy's extreme. Yeah, this guy's extremely correct. And you're an extreme idiot if you buy into this. That's what I can tell you. You're an idiot if you buy into this stuff. They call this stuff free range because they know they can sell it higher amounts to people that are affluent and don't feel really good about the cramped conditions. When we looked at this deeply, I can assure you that there is no difference really in the overwhelming majority of raising poultry and the normal factory farm. The difference is you're paying a lot more money for the same exact thing. As you see, the factory farm below allows a slight amount of flow through it. So they open it up a little bit, let the air come through it. For this reason, the organic poultry industry has self-regulated their way into hearts and minds of yuppies who justify their consumption of birds by thinking they are humanly treated before they are slaughtered to be consumed as clean food. How can you call the flesh of a dead animal, the carcass of a dead animal, clean food? How many of you, if you saw a dead animal on the side of the road that was freshly killed, would ever jump out of the car, grab it, and eat it? Raise your hand. Well, good. We've gone right down in the number now. To 0. So we started at 2, the enlightened, then we went to 1. Now we have none. None of you really want to eat the carcasses of a dead animal. But you do it every day because you get it at the health store. When the hell are you going to wake up? You have more than one little part of your brain that says me, 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 me. It could be, it's hard. You can crack it open, and you start to see. And sometimes you see more than you want to see. So here was a colleague and a friend of mine. She was scrutinized, as all the great scientists I've ever known have been. Yet science is a pecking order also, not of chickens, of something with less intelligent than chickens, I think. That they establish false truths and basically hold the false truths as academic wisdom, and they teach it and perpetuate the false truths and regurgitate it, and you're all impressed because they're scientists, and the system continues to be the same broken system that we've always had, and even becomes more broken. Well, this woman was there screaming 65, 75 years ago about chicken causing cancer, and she proved it. There was no question. If you're really interested in the deep science of this, most of you are going to have an opinion on what I say and say I'm wrong or maybe he's right. But the real scientists out there that are not arrogant, that maybe is 1% of all of you on the planet Earth, the non-arrogant scientists, maybe really want to see 65 years of research from Dr. Virginia Livingston. Because when you read her research, man, you're going to get on your knees and either cry for being goofy in the past, or you're going to praise her. You're going to say, how was it that we missed this incredible fact that she had been teaching us and spent her entire life, over 60 years, telling us that chickens and turkeys and ducks cause more cancer than any other meat out there? So Livingston spent 60 years researching the health hazards derived from the consumption of chicken, ducks, turkeys. Her landmark findings of viruses in the flesh of these creatures that precipitated a wide variety of cancer was ignored by mainstream science and their mega food company allies. Now, who do you think hires food scientists? Anyone know? It's called food industries. Would you ever have a time, even if you have a very successful business, how many of you on the planet Earth would ever hire a food scientist? Nobody. So only food scientists go to universities that are funded by the very food companies that they're now going to work for. So it's a big cycle, a 360-degree cycle. And when they get out, basically the food companies now have the ponds there. They send them out to do bogus research and tell you how wonderful this is, and we don't ever use the words hormone-rich chicken, hormone-rich turkeys, contorted, absurd, 120 times larger than they should be turkeys. We say they're plump. They're plump. And we actually have certain companies, and I won't name their names, that have the plumpest turkeys, which, by the way, have the most hormones in them. And they've made laws now so they can pump hormones into these turkeys and then take the first growth generation, which is not going to take a year, by the way, to growth generation of the turkeys. They're still plump, and put organic on the side because they self-regulate. They self-regulate. Nobody's watching this stuff, and you're not watching it because you're too busy out spending your money and eating all this wonderful organic food. And I don't know where the word organic and meat come together. That's like north and south, east and west. It doesn't come together. Now here's the biggest problem about this. If you don't like anything else I said, you're certainly not going to like this. Here's what we do know, and there's references there to just a few of my choice research studies. I probably read something like 3,000 research studies on poultry when I was putting this book together, and I make it easy. This is not a heady book. I make this for the average person because the heady people aren't going to read this anyway. They're going to sit around with their own opinion because they're part of the system. But for you, the lay public, I make this interesting, so you may want to look. We know the direct link to breast cancer. Not maybe, not possibly. We know that if you eat turkey, if you eat chicken, if you eat duck, which is really disgusting. I liked all meat. I never liked duck for some reason. I don't know why. We know that it causes breast cancer. That was only April in 2016, the latest study that I happen to think was one of the better studies in there. Colon cancer, we know that for sure. That you want more colon cancer, eat chicken. Great way to get colon cancer. How many of you like colon cancer here? Oh, good. We got a real zero on that one. We got -0 on that one. If anyone said, yes, I like colon cancer, we'd ask security to take you right out the door at that point. Leukemia, you want leukemia. Leukemia, great. That's not so bad. Nobody wants leukemia here? Come on. This is like an auction nobody wants to bid at. What's wrong with you? Come on, bid a little bit. Some of you are suicidal. You've been eating chicken. So why not die of leukemia? How about diabetes? Come on, diabetes isn't cancer. At least you have a shot. You may not die. You'll suffer before you die with this one. Your eyes may go bad. Your limbs may fall off. You may get gangrene. They may have to exhume your leg. That's not such a bad disease as cancer, is it? And how about heart attacks? That's an easy one. Come on. I must have at least one taker for a heart attack. Now, half of you are going to die. In Europe and North America, about 50% of us will die in the Western developed world from a heart attack or stroke. So you're going to die anyway. Come on. At least one person. Don't I have one person that wants to have a heart attack? And most of you don't suffer from a heart attack. The younger you are, the better chances you're going to die on the spot. Now, you know why you don't die on the spot when you're older? Because the body is smarter than you. Listen to this. This is amazing how smart the body is. Your brain's not smart. Your body is. As you get older and you've clogged your body up with chicken fat and turkey and all of this other nonsense and eggs, which we're going to get to in a minute, by the way, your body produces other veins. Because it says, this idiot's just clogged up all the veins. I can't have blood go anywhere. So it actually produces, your own body produces, without the brain involved, thank God. The brain would say, oh, you don't need to do that. Chicken's healthy. So now it has extra veins. So when, by the way, you have a heart attack and you're older, you have a release valve. When you're young and you only have certain veins and blood doesn't get to the brain, it's called a stroke. When blood doesn't get to the heart, it's called a heart attack. And kaput. One of you, come on, just one of you. Come on, eat chicken. You can have a heart attack. You die quick. At least no young people want to have a heart attack here? Come on, raise your hand. Okay. How about obesity? Some of you look too skinny to me here. Obesity is not a bad thing. I was obese at one point. And, you know, I didn't die. I almost died. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't walk upstairs. And boy, oh boy, did I like to eat all of this stuff we're talking about today. And eggs, oh my God, every time I had a chance to eat eggs, I ate 12 because they were really cheap. When I was a kid, eggs were like a dozen for 38 cents. And so I couldn't afford much of anything, so what I did is got a whole dozen and ate the whole dozen of eggs. So my grandmother, my grandfather, on both sides, my parents, they told me how healthy eggs were. Matter of fact, every single morning you had to have fried eggs. It wasn't bad enough they were little fecal of chicken in that. It wasn't bad enough that they were, in fact, the fetus of a chicken. But now I had to fry them in butter. And remember what happened when you fry them in butter and they touched your mercury fillings? Oh, it was weird. They had this weird feeling in there. Come on, don't any of you want to be at least obese? This is not a friendly audience I have here today. I was hoping for a friendly audience. You know, you're really the diehards up here early in the morning to listen to this. How about brain cancer? Come on. A lot of you really need to replace your brain anyway. So, so you've been eating chicken and turkey and all that. Come on. Brain cancer. All right, the last one, prostate cancer. This is horrible. I don't know if I'll ever come back and lecture the real truth about health to you because none of you want to have one of these diseases from eating chicken. That is really sad to me. The next time I come back here, I hope. Now, eggs' evil health destruction offering comes from the rampant E. coli. How many of you know about and salmonella that have been discovered in 90% of the eggs? You're saying, oh, Brian's exaggerating here. No, Brian doesn't exaggerate. Brian happens to read science. Seemingly alternative doctors don't read science. Seemingly research scientists don't read their own scientists. And science, I know that to be a fact. When I go out and I lecture to them, I quiz them on their own science. They all are against what I say, but they don't read the science they're against. I can tell you that for sure. They tested over 1 million eggs around the globe. This is not an Americana phenomenon. This is not only in the United States. You know, we're so mono-focused in America. You're going to hear a lot of the lectures here say America, America, America. I'm happen to be interested in global population. Yes, I'm an American, but I'm a human. I'm part of the human global population. And globally, they looked at country after country. Half of these eggs were so-called organic varieties. In some of your countries around the world, they're called ecological. In Germany, they're called bioland. In France, they're called bio. You know, they have all these fancy words for organic. And when they tested 90% of the eggs, over 1 million eggs, 90% of them had either E. coli or salmonella or both on it. Now, how many of you thought eggs were the real food before I told you that? Raise your hand. At least one of you, 2 of you, 3 of you. They're the real food. They're the real food if you want to have, as pointed out yesterday in my wife Anna Maria's program, more breast cancer. Now, that's one study we can point to, because when they exhumed the tissue from breast cancer, they found salmonella in almost every single specimentation that most likely came from you eating organic chicken. One consumed egg gives you 230 grams of cholesterol. You don't need 1 gram of cholesterol. How about 28 clinical studies were reviewed by the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition? They said dietary fats from birds play a role in development of obesity. And you're being told, eat chicken, you'll get skinny. Matter of fact, why Chick-fil-A try to convince you to eat 1 or 2 pounds of chicken daily, 7 days a week, daily, 7 days a week, is so you could lose weight. Woo! And you say, well, that sounds better than steak. By fattening up the birds and injecting them with antibiotics and other pharmaceuticals, they bloat and you buy. You ever hear bloat and buy? That's what you're doing. They're bloating and you're buying. You're bloating and buying. Look at that. Plump, succulent, tasty, moist. Remember the word moist? It's moist, not dry. Well, Mama knew how to cook that well. Horrible stuff. Here's what happens. You know, little tiny girls are no longer little tiny girls. At 4 years old, 5 years old, they want to put makeup on. They start to grow bosoms now, commonly at 6, 7, 8 years old. I had a family in my office about 15, 20 years ago. The mom and grandmom were there crying, and oh my God, our little 3-year-old must have cancer. She's bleeding vaginally, and we went to the doctors, and they say she doesn't have cancer, and what could it be? And then I talked to the mother, and the mother said, oh, yes, she loves chicken nuggets. She loves chicken nuggets. Well, when you put hormones into a boy or a girl, basically what happens is they start to mature at an unnatural state, a rapid unnatural state. So why we now have menstruation that dropped from when I was young, from 15 or 16 years old, young ladies started to have menstruation at 15 or 16 to about 10 years old, is because of chickens' population. Isn't that interesting? Now, is this Brian's opinion? No. I have very strong opinions, but I also happen to read science, and the science tells us the number one reason for antibiotic resistance, the number one reason little girls have menstruation at 7 and 8 years old, the number one reason women have menopause now 10 years sooner than their moms, is because people are consuming more and more hormones that come from animals. And the animal of choice today for you yuppie, hippie, natural eaters happen to be chicken. And I don't eat hamburgers anymore. I eat turkey burgers. Because I'm so smart. I'm an enlightened, yuppie, white person who has money. Well, congratulations for being conned again. Highly educated cons are even better than the cons for the average person, because they really have to go through a whole veneer of arrogance to get to your heart and soul and pocketbook, and they've done it. Let's give them a hand. The industry's done a brilliant job bringing you down, bringing you down. Hormones, antibiotics, and other drugs. How about other drugs? Pumped into these manifest antibiotic resistance, premature puberty, and early menopause. So you want less menopause, you don't want your little girls to have menstruation and like boys at 8 years old, then you better stop feeding them stuff that's going to make that happen. So advanced glycation end products. Does anyone know what that means? RAGE, it's called. Plays a role in pathogenics of renal disorder. This is often related to the consumption of fowl. So I may have mentioned, and if not, I will mention to you now, that what we do know is that we anticipate by the middle to end of this century that 50% of the world global population in the affluent nations of the world will have kidney dysfunction. I once again will repeat to you what I've just said. That very soon, 50% of you listening out there, if you don't radically shift the way you live, think, act, eat, etc., will end up with kidney disorder. Now, kidney disorders, I hate all diseases, but the one I really probably hate right at the top of the list happens to be kidney disorder. Because when you have kidney disorder, you go into a hospital 3 days a week, you get very familiar with the hospital. This is if you have good insurance. If you don't have good insurance, this doesn't happen. You go into the hospital 3 days a week, you spend 3-4 hours at the hospital on a machine because you no longer have a kidney that functions. And we're telling you that what we have is overwhelming evidence that one of the major causes of that is not only all meat consumption, all animal fat consumption, all egg consumption, but also fowl consumption. Now, seemingly nobody wants to acknowledge this because poultry consumption goes up. And when I used to go to a health store years ago, all health stores were plant-based. But now they want to put under the umbrella of health organic animal food. So many places I go when I travel the globe to go to a health store and they have the salad bar, it's no longer a salad bar. It's a carcass of animal bar and an egg bar. And because those of you who are non-thinkers, which is a majority of the population of the world, basically because it's under the umbrella of a health store, you say it must be healthy. So there you go, chomp right down on the eggs. But of course, you're smart enough not to eat the yellow part of the egg. You eat the white part of the egg, right? Silly people. Silly people. So we talked a couple of times about acrylamides, but you'll hear us speak more about that tonight in our panel. Because I yesterday showed you, and you may want to, if you didn't tune in yesterday or you weren't here, you may want to look at that. It's already up on The Real Truth About Health. I talked about the 3 things we know for sure when you cook a food. Not maybe, not possibly. One's leukocytosis, one is heating fats, and the other are acrylamides. So beyond the fact that we're eating chicken, I never ate a raw chicken, even though I ate lots of meat in my life. I never heard of raw chicken. I've heard of raw fish, I've heard of raw steak, but I haven't heard of raw chicken. Have you? Okay, nobody eats raw chicken. So you always cook it, right? So besides the chicken having antibiotics, having chemicals, giving you the weird hormones that they have in it, etc., now you're going to cook it and you're going to give yourself more cancer with it. Isn't that great? This is like one-stop shopping. You can have kidney disorder, you can have obesity, you can have breast cancer, you can have brain cancer, diabetes, you can write. You don't even have to do anything else wrong. Just eat chicken. Acrylamide is a well-established carcinogen, presents itself when frying chicken and other meats. This acrylamides introduce oxidative stress, also degrades sperm, and affects conception. So I'm working all of the time with young married couples from around the world that are saying, I've tried for 5 years, I've tried for 10 years, can't have babies. Now, the only good part of that story is they keep trying, and that part's fun. But they don't have babies at the end of it. And we now estimate that 1/3 of the young married couples who are attempting to have babies can't, and we came up with a new whole subset of medicine called what? Fertility medicine. So now they're experimenting with hormones on humans because humans can't have babies because they've eaten hormones in animals. Now let me repeat what I just said to you. So the overwhelming number one reason why young people can no longer have babies, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, the number one reason, there's many reasons. I don't have the time to speak about it all. Cell phones in here and all of it, but everything. But the truth, number one reason is because we eat animals with hormones. Our hormones go wacky. When our hormones go wacky, sperm and eggs don't produce the way they should. Can't have babies. And what do? When that doesn't happen, we now give you hormones. Really smart idea. Let's give them a hand for that brilliance. Come on, what's wrong? You don't go along with this program? Well, I don't know what's wrong with you guys. I thought New Yorkers were smart. I really thought you guys were the smart people here in the United States, huh? Maybe not. Maybe I got to go to California. They'd probably do a standing ovation when I did that one. Meat science studies. Yes, they actually study meat. And every once in a while, we actually capture truth out of that, because usually they suppress this information. They don't want you to know what inside of the culture of the poultry industry does. So in their studies, they show that pan-fried duck, isn't that sounding like something you've heard at an Asian restaurant? Come in, have pan-fried duck. Now, at one point, I would have thought, gee, that sounds delicious. Pan-fried duck. They're actually telling you what it is, and you don't regurgitate. The breast of the duck create a type of cancer that's unique to duck. Only this is like duck cancer. So if you could be the only one on your block that gets this kind of cancer, wouldn't that be nice? You could say, hey, what do you have? Oh, I have breast cancer. Well, I have HAA. And the public wouldn't know it because you ate duck that you got that, which is a serious cancer-causing element. How many of you knew that? I didn't, until I wrote this book. It's so funny. I always think I know a lot about a subject until I start to study it. Then I realize I should have studied it a lot longer, a lot before. Look at that little duckling there. Egg consumption. More eggs produce more breast cancer. Now look at that one. Headline. Where is it? The Journal of Breast Cancer. This isn't like the hippie journal of let's do alternative medicine and go against the medical profession. This is the Breast Cancer Journal, the #1 journal worldwide on breast cancer. If you're a breast cancer guy, you basically read that journal every day, and they say more eggs produce more breast cancer. This is in 2014. The analysis of 13 separate studies. This is called a meta-study. Remember last night, those of you that listen, I said, Ann and I don't like to read studies unless they're meta-studies. Several people did studies, and then you see the one strain of truth, because every study is pretty much biased and paid for by some industry. But if you read 13 studies and they all say this one particular thing, bingo, that's real at that point. This is what the studies wrote. Results show that egg consumption was associated with increased breast cancer risk for those consuming 5 eggs or more a week. A week? You eat one cake, it has 10 eggs in it. One cake. You don't even know cakes have eggs in it. How come you have to get vegan cake? How come kegs were moist and puffed up? You know, they puff up because you put eggs in there, they puff up. And they become moist because of that. And even when they make the donuts for you vegans who don't give up junk food, you're junk food vegans, they're basically putting a substitute for eggs in there to puff it up. Because you're so used to muffins being puffy with eggs in them, you don't even get it. 5 eggs a week you increase the breast cancer. Now, I don't know how many of you listening around the world, but I never stopped at 5 eggs a week. Again, I was eating 10 and 12 eggs at a sitting sometimes. How many of you here in the auditorium relate to that? Well, that's it. Most people consume 5 eggs in a meal. Now, immunity is compromised when birds are consumed with a virus microcid. And when you start to look at all these bacillus, the fungi that resist in the cell and tissue of these creatures that people choose to consume. So what we know is every single creature that's in the flesh of the animal is now transmitted into your body. So many, 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 many people, in fact, end up with not only the bacteria that comes from this and the viruses that my good friend Dr. Livingston proved cause cancer, but you end up with amoebas. You end up with parasites. And even after cooking it, many of these things are still present. Isn't that amazing? And why do you think the big thing is when you're making chicken, you've got to clean your cutting board? How many of you haven't heard that? You don't know that. Yeah. Even if you're a vegan, you've heard that before. Why? Because all of these little bugs, and these are actually what they look like. So take a look at what you're ingesting there and touching. And remember the salmonella and the E. coli we spoke about? 90% of the eggs tested, over 1 million eggs globally. That's there. You don't even have to eat the things. Just touch them and rub your nose. You won't worry about the flu at that point. Believe me, you won't be around to have a flu. Keep doing that enough. That's what they look like there. How about Campylobacteria? Bacteria is found in over 90% of the birds. Very, very, very common. 90% of birds, by the way, have this Campylobacteria in it. It's in their egg. This not only creates food poisoning, but can lead to reactive arthritis, the bloodstream infection, bacterium, as well as nerve disorder. How many of you know about that syndrome? Have you ever seen anyone with that syndrome? You get paralysis. So people walk around, they can't talk, part of their lip is hanging down, it's like a paralysis of the face. And where does it come from? We know where it comes from. It comes from Campylobacteria. That's in 90% of all the birds tested globally, consistently. By the way, that testing's been going on for as long back as they've done it, before I was born, before anyone in this room was born. And by the way, they always find 90% have this Campylobacteria in it. And when you go to the doctor, what's the doctor do? Well, we don't know why you got sick. You must have picked something up. What did you pick up? You picked up a chicken wing. You picked up the leg of a chicken. Picked up the breast of the chicken. Wealthy people, you only ate the breast of the chicken. No. Get over it, people. Get over this shit. So we're going to move on to the next slide presentation. But in fact, allow birds to be birds, and your body to be without burdens. There's no need to consume the flesh of a flying creature. Those of you that still think that you bullies, that still think you have to go out as men and capture the necks of a bird and crack it and bring home the fowl to your family, become men. Bring yourself home. Bring love. Bring harmony. Bring peace. Bring food. Bring love. Don't bring insecurity. We continue to perpetuate insecurity, guess what we're going to have? Perpetual insecurity. And that's all I can say. You know, when people start to love themselves enough, they're actually going to love themselves enough to eat the right food. They're going to love themselves to harmonize with nature. They're going to love themselves to do the right thing. And until you're willing and ready to love yourself, you're always going to find yourself in this merry-go-round of craziness that we call modern humanity. Is this what you really want to be part of, people? Although everyone else is going along on that merry-go-round and riding their different horse, I want the horse, I want the elephant, I want the zebra, I'll jump on top of that. You don't have to do that. You can actually jump off the merry-go-round. When you jump off the merry-go-round, you can actually watch what goes around in circles. When you watch what goes around in circles, pretty much you have control of your life. And until you have control of your life, I can assure you, you'll make bad decisions. For instance, when I go to gyms around the world, I always listen to what the so-called fitness instructor tells people. Now, what they do is they say, well, you know, you want to have muscle, you have to eat an entire chicken a day. Isn't that weird? An entire chicken a day you have to eat. Now, why do people who eat lots of meat look like they have muscles? Anyone know? Because you're not digesting the animal. The animal goes in, it remains in the body for a few days, 3 days to be exact, doesn't really digest. You're not eating a carbohydrate, you're filling yourself up with the flesh of an animal, and in fact it starts to deposit acidity that erodes both the bones as well as every cell, every organ that you have in the body. And in fact, it leaves now behind everything that we've just talked about over the last few minutes together. And combined, you're getting sick from that. And when your body starts to emaciate, it starts to starve, your muscles pop out. It has nothing to do with that. We have a program at Hippocrates, by the way, that we do about once a year now. One of the most impressive competitive bodybuilders in the world, a very, very, very muscular, large man comes in who's a vegan and basically teaches people, they fly in from around the world, how to be large and muscular if that's what turns you on. Now, I'm not sure if that turns you on or not. Maybe you want to be like the turkey of today, large and muscular. But we all want muscles. Matter of fact, every sexy person you've ever admired has muscles, don't they? Every actress, every actor. Matter of fact, we had an actress recently that came through the Institute, one of the, I won't name her name, but very famous one, and she also was a model, a very famous model, and she said, you know, my whole life, she said to me, is working out and eating well. And she said, you know, until I started to eat this way, I didn't feel well. I exercised and ate well, but I didn't feel well. And so we've got to start to change our whole attitude about all of this. We've got to really radically shift the way we think about all of this. So now we move on to some things we know about cancer, because the number one thing that I got out of writing the Poultry book is that if you want to get cancer, it's a better way to get cancer than any other disease. And I can tell you something, I don't know anyone that actually seeks out cancer, although it's becoming more and more prominent. Now, I wrote a series of books for the eggheads, for the scientists. You know, the scientists, when I would be out over the last 40-some years lecturing at universities and medical groups, holistic medical groups, they'd always say, well, you don't have science on this. And, you know, you're going to hear a lot of the guys here regurgitate science, because that's what they do. They don't do the work. They read other people's science and regurgitate it. And so I got a little angry about that, and so I sat down a number of years ago and I wrote a 3-volume academic series that all it is science. And by the way, most of you sitting here, most of you listening, you'd hate these books because all it is pure science. I hated writing them, but I needed to do it. Because it's just one study after another study after another study after another study, another study, blah, 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 study after study. But it's what these people do. So they sit around and they say, well, look at how much we know because we know everyone else's research, and that's all we need to do. And this series is called Food is Medicine. And what I do is I focus very much on phytonutrients. Anyone know what a phytonutrient is? Well, I can tell you one thing. You don't find it in chicken. You don't find it in ducks. You don't find it in turkeys. You don't find it in eggs. You find it in plants. So where the healthy little chicken that was out in the wild would get disease-resisting nutrients is from eating raw plants. And you can get the same thing. You don't have to eat the chicken and think you're going to get that. You basically go to the raw plant and eat it. So phytochemicals play a role, and well-documented role, in protecting human health. As revealed by the results of test tube and animal experiments, human studies, and clinical trials. That's what we've been doing, by the way, since the doors of Hippocrates opened. We didn't know that, by the way. We didn't know that probably till the mid-1990s. We didn't know why what we did worked was because of what now I'm talking about, phytochemicals. And how many of you understand how profoundly impressive this scientific discovery was? Well, let me go back and give you a little history, because I've repeated this in the past, but I think it's so important that you know this, I'm going to repeat it again. That in 1948, by mere chance, by mistake, a scientist was looking at his microscope. He saw, when he was looking at vegetables and fruits, elements coming from them and attacking the bacteria that was naturally on the Petri dish and killing the bacteria. And he thought, I must be seeing something. So he brought his friends and colleagues in, they looked at it, they said, no, this is all real, and they called it phytochemicals, or later phytonutrients. Nobody did anything with it, because we were in the time of chemistry. You know, we had the time of Aquarius in the 60s. Well, now we were in the 70s, and the 70s were the time of chemistry. Chemistry was going to save the world. Now what chemistry has done is destroy the world, so you know that. And don't worry, be optimistic. Now we're in the time of quantum biology and quantum physics, but the scientific community has to figure that out. Most of them don't agree with that because they make their money on old school nonsense chemistry, etc. But with this said, they started to look at ways that disease may be affected. Your NIH, believe it or not, put great money and great effort in the 1980s in this country doing good work on plant medicine, because they realized the future of humanity and our health and our survival depended upon not creating chemistry anymore, so quietly started to fund major studies on biology and discovered that each edible plant uniquely has a different chemistry in it. Isn't that nice? Now this is profound. Those New Agers out here, listen very closely. You're going to love this part. So these plants go back millions, hundreds of millions of years. And encoded into those plants were medicines that would help your species that's only been in our form for 10,000 years. Now, I'll repeat it again. So plant chemistry, called phytochemicals, were encoded by the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, into plants to heal your Homo sapiens species that has only been around for this last 10,000 years. Now, if that's not cosmic, I don't know what is. That's a real omer. On that one. Interesting stuff, isn't it? So now people always say, well, you know, major universities aren't interested in this. No. Scientists are not interested in this. Nutritionists are not interested in this. Medical doctors are not interested. But major universities where I get most of my data from, by the way. They do great studies. I'll never forget a few years ago I was in a medical group speaking, and this doctor started to almost boo me and criticize, oh, you're not talking about real science. And so anyway, I quoted a study that was done not only at his university, but on the same floor of his university. And I said, gentlemen, I think what you need to do is pick up off your chair, get off your fat ass, walk down the hallway and talk to the doctor who published his study 2 years ago. That's what closed-mindedness does. Under the auspices of the brightest, I've learned, are the most closed-minded. The worst people I lecture to are alternative doctors. They really think they have it down. Corvallis, Oregon. You ever hear of Linus Pauling? Pretty impressive guy. So impressive, the only man in history that won Nobel Prizes for two totally unique subjects. I had the privilege to meet him twice, never knew him. He was a really interesting personality, because not only was he incredibly bright, but he was incredibly kind and down to earth. You know, usually really bright guys like that, they're interesting, but that's it. He was interesting and nice. Interesting and nice is better than just interesting. Well, here's what the Linus Pauling Institute said. They used to be at Stanford, off the campus of Stanford in Palo Alto. Out of respect, after Linus Pauling passed on, they moved it back to his alma mater, Oregon State University. And they discovered yet another reason why sulforaphane compounds in broccoli and other cruciferous vegetables is so medicinal. It provides not just one, but two ways to prevent cancer through the complex mechanism of epigenetics. So in the United States, very rarely do we do epigenetic studies, lifestyle and chemistry studies out of food. They have done it. Matter of fact, I am so impressed with them, I brought the #1 authority in the world on phytochemicals to Hippocrates. And if you do our online program, he's part of our faculty. The top scientists in the world are part of the faculty on our online program. And whenever we can get them to come into Hippocrates in Florida, we bring them in. And his name is Dr. David Williams. And Dr. Williams, when he came, had tears in his eyes, and he said, I didn't think anyone read my science. I said, let me tell you, Dr. Williams, you're the man that validates everything we've done here for over 60 years. You're our hero. Because he's basically telling the truth. And what he says is once you cook a food, these medicines are gone. The world's leading authority out of the most impressive organization on the planet called the Linus Pauling Institute on this. Epigenetic, an increased focus of research around the world, refers not just to our genetic code, but also the way that diet, toxins, and other environmental factors change gene expression. Now, we used to think genes took generations to change. Now we know in quantum biology, I write about this in an upcoming book, Quantum Human Biology, that literally your attitude changes genes less than a second. If I go, ha! Your genes just changed. Fact, not fiction. It appears that DNA, methylation, and HDAC inhibit both of inhibitors, both of which can be influenced by sulforaphane, when working in concert with each other, maintain proper cell function. Isn't that interesting? They sort of work as partners and talk to each other. So now we know that these complex chemistries that came hundreds of millions of years before your species literally know how to prevent diseases that didn't exist 200 years ago. Boy, that's good stuff, isn't it? At least to me, this is interesting. Another pretty impressive place. Ann Arbor, Michigan. How many of you are from Michigan here? How many of you are listening in Michigan? You're probably in front of a fire with 5 blankets on top of you this time of year. A compound derived from broccoli could also help to prevent and treat cancers by targeting cancer stem cells. The small number of cells that fuel a tumor's growth, according to a new study from researchers at the University Comprehensive Cancer Program. The study tested sulforaphane, a compound in broccoli and broccoli sprouts, in both mice and cell cultures. Cell cultures are human cultures, so you know that. Researchers found sulforaphane targeted and killed the cancer stem cell and prevented new tumors from growth. So now what we're saying, not only does it prevent cancer and help reverse normal cancer, it stops new cancer cells from growing, so that means the metastasize of cancer. So how come I'm telling you here at The Real Truth About Health, you should be eating broccoli sprouts every single day, and your doctor doesn't tell you that? Even if you have the greatest doctor in the world, they don't know this. And they don't bother to read this because it's not mainstream literature. It's from the best scientific organization. The best scientific organization and best scientists and best scientific organizations are never read, by the way. After they die, they say, isn't that brilliant what they discovered 20 years ago? That's what always happens. It has nothing to do with reality. Sulforaphane has been studied previously for its effect on cancer, but this study shows that it benefits in inhibiting breast cancer stem cells. The new insights suggest the potential of sulforaphane in broccoli extract to prevent or treat cancer by targeting critical cancer cell studies. How about sugar? How many of you saw my presentation at The Real Truth About Health on sugar in the past? You think chicken was bad? Get the sugar. Numerous important findings show that cancer cells can readily metabolize fructose to increase proliferation. It is well established among the best scientists in the world today, the number one way to create cancer is from fruit sugar. I will repeat what I said to you. The number one research scientist in the world happens to be on cancer. He wrote the definitive book on cancer, Dr. Thomas Seyfried. You can see him on the Hippocrates website. Every once in a while, I get the top minds, I bring them together, I do scientific conferences at Hippocrates, so I get to know these people, shake them down, see if they're real. And he's real. He's a Boston guy. And if you think I talk against things, he makes me look like a Boy Scout. I always say, tone it down, tone it down. He rails against what they do with cancer patients like I've never heard anyone rail. Thomas Seyfried. This has major significance for cancer patients given dietary fructose consumption, which indicates that efforts to reduce refined fructose intake or inhibit fructose mediation actions will disturb cancer growth. Now, where most of you get fructose is high fructose corn syrup, but you can get it in mangoes, you can get it in bananas, organic, by the way, get it in cherries, get it in grapes, get it in all that. So that's why nearly 40 years ago at Hippocrates, we took fruit out of the diet for anyone with cancer. And then we realized it's not only cancer, it's viruses, it's bacteria, it's mold, it's yeast, it's fungus. It is low blood sugar called hypoglycemia, and it's a high blood sugar. And we were considered the nuts. Now we are not the nuts anymore, because there's lots of nuts, like Stanford, University of California, German Cancer Institute. You want me to keep going? That everyone is in the same chorus saying the whole same thing. Wow, fruit feeds all these diseases. Fruit sugar feeds these diseases. Well, but I heard Dr. Holistic Joe or Mary or Sally, and they said, eat fruits and vegetables and eat 5 servings a day. I know you can't get your head around it. You're still mourning the loss of chicken consumption. Wake up, people. Are you real? Are you pretending? That's my question. Are you real? Are you really trying to get healthy? Are you really? Or is this a hobby for you? You sit your ass here listening to all of us as a hobby and think this is unique and nice, and then you go out and eat crap? Well, don't watch us. We're not interested in losers. We're interested in winners. We're interested in people standing up. If we don't stand up and change, if you can't do it for yourself and your family, how do you think we're going to survive as a human race? It's an impossibility. If those of you who perceive yourself as knowledgeable and perceive yourself as enlightened and perceive yourself as conscious are totally sleeping and you just want to do moderate things, well, then you're part of the problem. Fruit, its juices, and all other forms of sugar cause inflammation throughout the body, leading to the development and metastases of every form of cancer. These findings were published in October 2011 Journal of Nutrition and Metabolism. Researchers Clement, look at that, he robbed my name and put a K in front of it. And Cameron further stated, cancers are so sensitive to sugar supply that cutting the supply will suppress the disease. Now, doctors are saying, Brian's wrong, I hear you out there, I listen closely. You're wrong. What do you think a PET scan is? The most impressive scan we've ever used on cancer in the history of humanity. We inject sugar in. And a colleague of mine did it at Stanford with fruit sugar. And by the way, when the cancer eats it, it lights up. And the PET scan can now see not only where the epicenter of the cancer is, but where the cancer is going to move to, metastasize to. This is a done deal, people. I know I'm taking away your lollipop. Emerging evidence indicates that impaired cellular energy metabolism is a defining characteristic of nearly all cancers, regardless of cellular or tissue origin. So what we mean is that, yes, we have nice, neat things in oncology they talk about. You have this cancer, sarcoma, melanoma, carcinoma, but the reality is it's all the same show. Just it manifests in different parts of the body and at different rates, different ratios. And you have melanomas, which are sort of weird guys. You know, melanomas are like the crazy guy in the cancer family. That's the one that runs around like a mashug, going completely nuts. So here he is. So you want to know how to spell somebody's name? There it is on the board for you. Thomas Seyfried. They're trying to get rid of this guy all of the time. Used to be at Yale, he's Boston College. He has his tenure up there. Any doctor on the planet Earth that deals with patients is going to see cancer patients. If you're going to see cancer patients, if you haven't read Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, you are not a good doctor. This is the definitive book in the history of cancer on cancer, written by Thomas Seyfried. We go back once again to what we all love. But again, in this group and around the world, you would not just eat normal potato chips, you would get organic potato chips. So now you're spending more money to give yourself cancer, right? Well, at least you can die with class. On the tombstone, they can say, spent a lot to die. Swedish renowned Karolinska We love Karolinska. They do great studies over there, right in Stockholm, where we'll be next month speaking. Discovered and published the initial findings on how cooking morphs the chemistry of plants, making a cancer-causing compounds. You know, when the Swedes came out with it, the entire chorus of the scientific community condemned them. Oh, they must have made a mistake. They must have made a mistake. Then other people started to do the studies, said, no, it's not a mistake. By the way, they're right. And here's the other things we can tell you. Researchers at Harvard School of Public Health, where I lectured 5 years ago, have found an increased risk of ovarian and endometrial cancer among non-smoking postmenopausal women who consume food and beverage containing high levels of acrylamides, a natural occurring chemical found in grains, potato chips, pretzels, and other compound baked and snack foods. Acrylamides are produced during the heating of these foods. So now when you go down to the big health food markets, you go down the aisle with nothing but pretzels and potato chips and organic corn chips, you better walk fast. Because you're in the health store to prevent cancer, and you're in the aisle that will give you cancer. Isn't that something? Now, how come the health store doesn't know that? Health store is in the business of selling you health food, not selling you health. Remember that. I never went to a store I bought health ever. You ever find a store that can give you health? I want health. I can't do it. I want health. Come on, I'm paying a lot of money. Can't do it. Nobody can give you health except who? You. Now you got it. You're the only one that can give you health. How about this one, a Dutch study? I love the Dutch. I go over there, they're riding bikes, and it's raining, it's cold, they're riding bikes. We're having a hard time walking, they're riding bikes. They look at 120,000 people, half of whom were women. How do you like that? Just like the population. You have 1/10 to say, and you're half the population. Matter of fact, you're more than half. There's more girls being born today than men. The first time in known history because of hormones. With that said, they found that women absorb more acrylamides, were twice as likely to develop ovarian and womb cancer as those ingesting a small amount. So you want 2 times more womb, 2 times more ovarian cancer, eat all of these organic cooked foods. The higher amount eaten by a woman involved was the equivalent to a single pack of crisps. I never ate a single pack of anything. Did you? How about I used to get the family size and sometimes eat 2 a day? Because I was the size of 2 families at that point. Half a pack of biscuits or a portion of chips a day. You know what a portion, you ever look at the side of these? They're like a joke. The size of a chip thing. You know, the chip bag is this big. They said, this is enough for 5 people. What 5 people? Small people? Elves? Nobody does that. You know, you eat the entire thing and say, oh, that's not enough. I'm not filled up. You know, have to have more. Organic plant food is equal subject to the acrylamide effect. Don't say it's organic, it doesn't. The same thing, you're paying more for the same disease. Now here's what I really want to get to. So the remedy, you know, I've been sort of giving you a stroll through the park of craziness. Now we're going to give you the remedy. When a seed is planted, it grows into a variable living food. Now look at that alone. If you don't have faith in God and nature, look at sprouting. That is unbelievable. You have this little seed, it can sit around for decades. Matter of fact, if you preserve it, it could sit around for 2,000 years. Just sits there. Come on, come on. When are you going to give me life? And bingo, you give it oxygen, you give it water, and it grows into what you see. This, by the way, took 6 days to do, what you see in front of you. Now, anyone have a little concept listening around the world or in this room that maybe the one at the right or your left over there is more nutritious than the one over there? How many of you think the one that's green is more nutritious than the one? Much, much more nutritious. Because when the little tiny baby adolescent girl is given birth, she now becomes a mother. And now she can produce many, many, many offspring. In the case of a sunflower, several thousand offsprings. So if I put that little seed into the ground and let it grow for about 6 or 7 weeks, that plant is beautiful and round and has about 3,000 seeds on it. That, by the way, is so powerful, in the morning it faces the east, and at night it moves to the west. Now, by the way, I don't eat one sunflower seed. In my diet on a daily basis, I consume between 2 and 2,500 sunflower seeds, grown into greens. That, by the way, as the Iranians taught us, yes, the Iranians, America, taught us at the University of Tehran, has another anti-cancer agent, phytochemical, that's not a sulforaphane. It also has essential fats, and it's a complete protein. You want to build muscle? Eat that. You want to get 2,500 like I do? Juice that. It's been part of our green drinks at Hippocrates for 40 years. Now, what happens when you cook the seed? Well, here we're going to talk about that. Cooking destroys the potential for growth in life. So how many of you, if I took a seed and I, in front of you, cooked it, and now in May here in the north, said, let's go out and plant it in our garden, would sit there waiting for it to grow? Raise your hand. Now, why would you not wait with me to see if a seed would grow in your garden if it had been cooked? Anyone know why? Because it's dead. Now, anyone here not know that when you cook a seed it's dead? Raise your hand. I see you out there in the world. Raise your hand. Oh, one person over there, you didn't understand. It was a language thing. So you all do agree. You all do agree it's dead. So now, if it's dead, why are you eating it? Do dead things make you grow? Do dead things give you energy? Do dead things give you nutrients? Well, I know some of you really want to raise your hand because you like organic potato chips. You like chicken wings. Organic, of course. I would not plant that seed in the ground because I know it would be a waste of time, and I would not plant that seed in my body and expect it to give me anything but carbohydrates that break down to sugar that feed every disease known to man and feed aging. I will repeat what I said again. I would not plant that seed in the ground because I know it's dead. I would not put that in my body and anticipate it's going to give me life, because death does not give you life. But what it will give me when it breaks down as a carbohydrate that is not nutritive is sugar. One does not have to be a scientist to know that planting a cooked seed will not reap a plant. Nutrition's missing link in the gaping absence of life force necessary to spark and maintain all life, including ours. Science doesn't talk about life. It talks about elements. It talks about chemistry. It is so abstract. The top scientists at the top colleges and universities in the world are abstract thinkers. They don't talk about what matters to you and I. They talk about elemental science. They talk about the periodic table. They don't talk about life. You're alive. Did you notice that? Most of you don't act like you're alive. This is just going to show you. In the back of my highly, highly intellectual books for the eggheads out there, you want to challenge what I said? Read the highly intellectual books. That's what pacifies you boys. I have study after study after study after study after study from around the world that shows you how bad cooking food is. From who? The very people and the very universities that criticize what we say. So that's what I'd like to say to you today. God bless, thanks for listening, and hope you wake the hell up. Take care.